My name is Margarita. Right now I'm pursuing my master's degree in occupational therapy, and for this video we will be measuring range of motion with the use of a goniometer. Sometimes range of motion is contraindicated, such is the case as dislocation of a joint, anheel fracture, immediately after surgery, any soft tissue surrounding the joint, in the presence of myocytic ossificants, or when ectopic ossification is possible. Other times it can be measured, but it needs to be done with extreme caution. The client has joint inflammation or an infection. The client is taking medication for pain or muscle relaxant. The client has osteoporosis, hypermobility, or subluxation of a joint, clients with hemophilia or hematoma, or when the client had just had injury to soft tissue, new fractures, prolonged immobilization, bony ankylosing is suspected, or the client has carcinoma, osteoporosis, any condition that would make the bone fragile. This is one of the goniometers we will be using today, and this is the stationary arm, and this is the movable arm. This is the fulcrum, which will be placed in the axis of rotation, elbow flexion and extension. Normal range of motion for that joint is 0 to 135 or 150, and for that the patient can be positioned in sitting or standing. The axis of rotation that we will be using is the lateral epicondyle, and for that we need to stabilize distal to the glenohumeral joint, so right here. The stationary arm will be parallel to the humerus, when the movable arm will be parallel to the radius. So position for this, she will have to have the humerus adducted to the body. The palm will be facing up or in supination, and I'm gonna need to stabilize distal to the glenohumeral joint. For me to be able to find the lateral epicondyle, I'm gonna have her flex a tiny bit, just so I can really get a feeling of the bone. And it's right there. Then I have her go back to the original position, which is straight. Keep her very adducted. The stationary arm. The fulcrum goes on the axis of rotation and parallel to the humerus, and then I have the stationary arm go so I have my first number, which is A0. Then I'm gonna keep my finger right under the axis, under the fulcrum. I remove it, I stabilize, and I have her touch her shoulder. Go as far as you can. Then I'm gonna reach for the goniometer again, replace my finger for the fulcrum, and you kind of try to keep the stationary arm in the bottom so you don't pinch your skin, and then you just bring the movable arm parallel to the radius, and then you are going to get your first measure, which is 0 to 140. Extension, we already know that she started at 0, so she would have the same as flexion and for extension. She has 0 to 145 for flexion and 0 to 145 of elbow extension. For supination, we're gonna use the smaller goniometer, which has also the stationary arm and also the movable bar, and we're also gonna use a pen. Position is gonna be seated, arm is gonna be adducted. It's gonna be adducted, and normal range of motion for supination and pronation is 0 to 80 and to 90. So for the purpose of this video, it should be seated, but so I can make it a little bit easier and show to the camera better, I'm gonna have her standing, and we're gonna use the axis of rotation is going to be the third MCP. She's gonna have again arm adducted, and she's gonna start in neutral. I'm gonna stabilize also distal to the glenohumeral joint. I'm gonna place the pencil perpendicular to the floor. The stationary arm is going to be perpendicular to the floor, and the movable arm will be parallel to the pen. I would need to be in this position so I could put it exactly what it is. So I'm gonna find the axis of rotation right here. Then I'm going to stabilize from back here, distal to the glenohumeral joint. Movable and I'm gonna replace with my finger. I'm gonna have her supinate, which means bring your palm up. And like I told you, I should be exactly here, but for the purpose of the video, I'm just gonna be kind of side so I can show you. I can let go of the stabilization, and then I'm going to replace my finger for the axis of the bar. Yes, it is perpendicular to the floor, and then the movable arm will be parallel to the pen. And she gives me, okay, you can let go. She gives me a reading of 0 to 90. For pronation, I'm also going to use the third MCP. I'm gonna place my finger there. She's gonna be adducted, and I'm gonna stabilize distal to the glenohumeral joint, and then the movable arm will be parallel to the pen, when the stationary will be perpendicular to the floor. Then I'm going to replace one finger. I'm going to stabilize right here. And now I'm going to have you bring your hand down to the floor. Okay, I can let go. Again, I come down here. This is perpendicular to the floor, and this is parallel to the pen, and this gives me a reading of 0 to 90. No, I'm sorry. 0 to 82. 0 to 82. To measure shoulder flexion, which is normal range of motion, is 0 to 170. We're going to use the big goniometer, and we are going to find the bony land. We can do it sitting or standing. We're going to find the humeral head. The humeral head. For that, I'm going to palpate between the clavicle and the scapula. I'm going to go about an inch lower because I really need to find the soft spot. That's what it is. I need to find the head. So it's not more than 2 inches. It's like between an inch and an inch and a half. And then your finger should be able to feel it softly. Okay. The stationary arm will be parallel to the trunk, and the movable arm will be parallel to the humerus. And I'm going to stabilize right above the shoulder. So it has a frontal axis of rotation. So I'm gonna place it right here. The stationary arm parallel, and then the movable parallel to the humerus. I'm gonna hold right here with my finger. I'm gonna stabilize. I'm gonna have her bring, okay, arm has to be adducted and the forearm needs to be in neutral. And then I'm gonna stabilize from here, and she's gonna bring her arm. Do me a favor, move this way so I can show. She's still adducted, she's still in neutral. Your hand needs to be, like your thumb has to be facing forward, just like that. And I'm stabilizing here, and she's gonna go bring your hand as high as you can, like almost to reach for the ceiling. As you can see, I ended up with a different axis of rotation, so I'm gonna have to come a little lower, eye level, and I'm gonna have to create an imaginary line that is going to come all the way here, right there. And I'm going to place the goniometer. I'm gonna use the fulcrum for the axis of rotation, which is the head of the humerus. The stationary arm will be parallel to the trunk, and the movable arm will go along parallel to the humerus. So that's it, parallel, parallel, and that gives me a reading of 0 to 155. There, you can bring it down. 0 to 155. For shoulder extension, I'm gonna have her standing. I'm gonna have her arm adducted. Her shoulder is gonna be adducted, and her forearm is going to be in neutral. So just like that, I am going to do the same thing. I'm gonna look between the clavicle and the scapula. And then I go 1.5 inches until I find the soft spot. Fingers should be able to go in and out easily. I'm gonna stabilize, and I'm gonna have her bring her arm. I'm gonna have you bring your arm back, like almost like you're playing bowling. Okay. The stationary arm parallel to the trunk, the movable arm parallel to the humerus, and that gives me a reading of 0 to 50. For shoulder abduction, normal range of motion goes from 0 to 170, and I'm gonna have my patient facing that way. It's going to be in standing, even though it could be sitting or standing position, but for this particular one, we're gonna do it standing. The bony landmark is the posterior side of the acromion process. And for that, what I'm gonna do is I am going to use the scapula and the clavicle. I'm gonna walk my fingers until I reach the end. And once I reach the end right here where they meet, I'm gonna start going back until I can kind of match it with the armpit. For this, I'm going to have to stabilize the trunk, and I'm gonna have her start in abduction, and I'm gonna have her put her palm up, which is supination, so I can free that motion. The goniometer will be placed, the fulcrum will be placed right on the bony landmark. It's gonna be parallel to the trunk, and the movable arm will move along with the humerus. So I remove, I stabilize the trunk, and I'm gonna have her reach the ceiling. You're gonna go to the side like you're doing snow angels. Okay, I can let go, and then I will replace the fulcrum, my finger with the fulcrum, and like you can see, the stationary arm will stay parallel to the trunk, and the movable arm will go up along with the humerus, and that is going to give me a reading of 175. So this is 0 from 175. 0 from 0 to 100, 170. And patient also has 0 to 170 of adduction, ADD, adduction, because she's starting writing 0. For shoulder internal and external rotation, I am going to use the smaller goniometer, and I am going to be finding the olecranon. The position for this measurement is humerus adducted, neutral for the forearm, and elbow should be at 90. This is the only measurement where my eyes won't be right in front of the axis or the fulcrum of the goniometer. So for this one, I have to leave the movable arm in the bottom, and the stationary arm will be placed olecranon process perpendicular to the trunk. Position is sitting or standing. Elbow is gonna be at 90. The arm is gonna be adducted. The humerus is gonna be adducted to the trunk, and the wrist is gonna be in neutral. I'm gonna find the olecranon process. I'm gonna touch it because I am unable to put my eyes in front of it. The movable part is gonna be in the bottom, and the stationary is going to be actually touching the olecranon process. I will have the stationary perpendicular to the body, and the movable is going to be parallel to the forearm. I'm going to stabilize right in the trunk, and I'm going to replace the goniometer for my finger, and I'm going to have you almost touch your belly. Yeah, go all the way as far as you can go. Okay, I can let go. Then I replace the fulcrum. I put it right at the axis of rotation, and stationary stays perpendicular to the body, and movable will move with the humerus, parallel to the humerus, and that gives me a reading of 0 to 55 when normal range of motion of internal rotation is 0 to 60. I'm going to stabilize from the trunk, and I'm gonna have you move your arm outside. So again, that's gonna be on the kind of process. I can palpate, and the movable arm will be parallel to the forearm. Zero to 78 of external rotation. I'm gonna measure wrist flexion. Normal range of motion for wrist flexion is 0 to 80. Patient needs to be in seated position. Forearm in mid position, resting on the table, the ulnar border, and the humerus adducted, which it is. Okay, and to find the radial stelloid, I'm going to have her bring her thumb up. Just give me a thumbs up. And then in between these tendons, I'm just gonna walk myself up until I find a little round bone, which is right here. And then I have her go back to neutral. Relax, just don't have to. And I'm gonna use this motor goniometer. I'm gonna stabilize from under so I don't prevent her from moving. Press it again. The stationary arm will be parallel to the radius, and the movable arm will be parallel to the second digit, to the MCP of the second digit. And right now I have my 0. So that's, I'm going to replace the fulcrum with my finger, and then I'm going to stabilize under, not to prevent movement, and I'm going to ask her to flex. So you're gonna bring your hand down towards you as far as you can go, flat. And then I don't have to stabilize anymore. I let go. The fulcrum takes place for my finger. The stationary bar in the bottom, and that's gonna be parallel to the radius, and then the movable arm will be parallel to the second digit, the MCP of the second digit. Let's keep the same position. I'm just gonna kind of turn it a little bit. That's as far as I can go. And that gives me a measurement of from 0 to 70. 0 to 70. For wrist extension, we're also going to have the patient seated, the humerus adducted, and the forearm in neutral, and it's going to be the same landmark. So I'm gonna have her thumbs up, and I'm gonna walk myself down until I can find my bony landmark, and I just find the radial stelloid. You can relax it now, it's just right here. I'm also going to use the stationary bar parallel to the radius, and the movable arm parallel to the MCP of the second digit, and that gives me a 0. I'm going to stabilize from the bottom so I don't prevent motion. And I'm gonna have you bring this, never mind, go back. That's it, that's good. And now I'm gonna have you go back as far as you can. I don't need to stabilize anymore. The stationary arm the fulcrum comes to take the spot of my finger. The stationary arm stays parallel to the humor, to the radial. And then the movable arm will come to the second digit MCP. And you can relax now, and that is going to give me a measure of 0 to 50. 0 to 50, that's too little. That's too little. I'm gonna measure really quick again without having that. Go like that, go up. Okay, I'm right here. Let me place this at, and all the whole arm straight. There, I'm at 0 there. Okay, I replace, bring it up for me. No. Relax it, straight. Let me stabilize and bring your hand up for me. As far as you can, as far as you can. Okay, good. So now I come, I take the place for this, and okay, up, let me show it. This looks a little bit better already. And this is 0 to 70. 0 to 70. Ulnar deviation, normal range of motion is from 0 to 30. Patient will be in sitting, and forearm will be in pronation, which is palm down, and it's gonna be resting on the table. Wrist will be in neutral, and your fingers will be just straight, relaxed. And her humerus is adducted. The bony landmark that we need for this measurement will be the dorsum of the wrist at the base of the third metacarpal over the capitate bone of the wrist. For that, we're gonna find this bone that comes from the MCP, and I will just walk my hand until I find a soft spot, a little space there. I can palpate really, really easy. And that's exactly where my axis of rotation will be. And I am going to be placing my fulcrum there. And the stationary bar will be parallel to the arm. When the movable arm, the black line will be on the third digit MCP. And I'm gonna stabilize the forearm, of course, from the bottom, because that's gonna be the only way that I can allow regular motion. And it's gonna be the same one for ulnar deviation and for radial deviation. So, let's see, fulcrum on the axis of rotation, movable stationary arm parallel to the forearm, and movable arm third digit MCP. I'm gonna replace my finger, and I am going to bring my hand down here, and I am going to have her now move towards her pinky, which is the same thing as ulnar deviation. And go as far as you can. As far as you can, and then you can leave it there. Then you just rest it. I don't have to stabilize anymore. This is going to come back. The fulcrum is going to back to the axis of rotation. Stationary arm parallel to the forearm, and the movable third MCP, and that gives me zero to 30 range of motion. 0 to 30 range of motion. For radial deviation, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna walk my hand until I can find my axis of rotation, which is over the capitate bones of the wrist. It's this soft spot right here. Again, going to have the stationary bar parallel to the forearm, and the movable arm parallel to the third MCP, and that gives me a 0. Then I'm going to replace that with my finger, and then I'm going to stabilize from the forearm, and I'm gonna have my client bring your thumb towards you. Turn, 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 turn. Go as far as you can. There you go. Perfect. Now you rest it. Replace finger with the fulcrum, stationary arm with the forearm, and find the third MCP, and that's going to give me a measure of 0 to 20, which is normal range of motion for wrist radial, you can rest, radial deviation. And of course that we kept her humerus adducted and her forearm in pronation. For the digits of the hand, we will be using a smaller goniometer that also has a stationary arm as well as the movable arm. And I'm also going to use this one to compare my measures, just because this one, the numbers are a little bit closer together, so it's easier to know exactly which one it is. I am going to start with the metacarpal phalangeal flexion, which normal range of motion is 0 to 90. And for that, I'm gonna have my patient sitting down. The elbow is going to be flexed, resting on the table, adductive of course, and the wrist will be neutral. That's where exactly where I'm going to stabilize, right at the wrist. And this is gonna be my bony landmark. This is my bunny landmark, which is the MP joint right here. And so I'm going to have her position in sitting. Like I said, I am going to stabilize from here. The stationary arm, which is the one with the long arm, will be right on the MP, and then the movable will move along with the finger. So let me stabilize, and then I'm gonna have her relax. And now I'm gonna have you move this finger forward. Go as far as you can. Go as far as you can. There you go. So I don't need to stabilize anymore. I come back with the fulcrum, put in the axis of rotation, stationary arm and movable arm, and I'm gonna show you really quick. That's how much I get, and that gives me a reading of 0 to 95. 0 to 95, and I will tell you right now what I get with this one. Move it again, all the way down, 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 down. Don't help with anything else, just there you go. And then stationary arm, fulcrum on the axis of rotation, which is the MP, and then I can let go, and yes. And so with this one I get 0 to 95 as well. So for only for the metacarpophalangeal flexion of 0 to 90, I can let go of the joint. I don't have to keep my finger there, just because it's very easy to see. However, for the purpose of the video, I will, for the rest, put my finger just to keep consistency with the rest of the video. For proximal interphalangeal flexion, which is normally 0 to 110 degrees, patient will be also sitting. The forearm will be resting on the table on the ulnar side, and wrist is going to be in neutral, and finger will be, the digits will be relaxed. And I'm also going to need to stabilize, but this time I'm going to be stabilizing from the MCP and the axis of rotation or bony arc that we will be using for the axis of rotation will be the PIP, and that's it. So the fulcrum on the PIP, movable arm on the proximal phalange, and the movable arm will go along with the distal phalange. Axis of rotation will be placed on the PIP, movable arm on the proximal phalange, and movable arm will be placed on the middle phalange. So I'm going to stabilize MCP. I'm going to stabilize MCP, and I'm gonna have you move this part of the finger inwards as far as you can go. There you go. Then I can let go, and then I'm gonna replace the stationary arm on the PIP joint, and then the movable arm is going to come down with the middle phalange. And that gives me a reading of 0 to 110. But I'm just gonna double check with the plastic. I'm gonna stabilize again, and I'm gonna have her move the PIP joint. Once again, movable stationary arm will be on the proximal phalange, and movable arm will come along with the middle phalange. And that gives me a reading of 0 to 110. 0 to 0. Okay, for the distal interphalangeal flexion, normal range of motion is 0 to 80 degrees. Patient will be in sitting. The humerus will be adducted to the body. The elbow will be flexed, and the forearm will be rested on the ulnar side. Wrist will be in neutral, and digits will be relaxed. Okay, so right there. And for the DIP joint, which is this last one, I am going to be stabilizing the DIP, and I am going to be placing the stationary arm on the mid phalange, and the movable arm will be placed on the distal. So she's positioned, and she has to be sitting down. So I'm gonna stabilize here, and I'm gonna have her move your last digit as far as you can go. And I'm gonna, for this one specifically, I'll kind of help her a little bit because it's really hard to move that last phalange without giving extra support. So extra support for this. Okay, go ahead, go as far as you can. I don't have to stabilize anymore. I let go, and then I'm going to use the stationary arm on the DIP. The fulcrum on the DIP, the movable arm on the middle phalange, and the movable arm will go along with the distal phalange. And that gives me a reading of 0 to 60. And this one is very easy to read